Eagle double G.
What's up YouTube, this is your friendly neighborhood movie nerd, back to give you guys everything that is going on in the world of movies and TV, and I am back with another Ridley Scott movie. This is the second movie that he has done this year. He is one of, I think, 2 directors that have done 2 movies within the year of 2017, and when I first saw the trailers, I had a feeling that this was going to be something that was only going to be known for being another Oscar movie, or at least an attempted Oscar movie, but this movie is going to go down in history for an entirely different reason than what it was started out for. So this is my review for Ridley Scott's second movie of 2017, All the Money in the World.
Tell him I'm coming.
So All the Money in the World features around the life of multi-millionaire oil tycoon J. Paul Getty, played in the film by Christopher Plummer. However, rather than focus on his life and how he made his millions, Scott takes an alternative approach, instead choosing to focus on a significant impact or an event that occurred shortly before Getty's death, which was the kidnapping of his grandson, Paul Getty III, played by Charlie Plummer, in 1973, I think was the year, in which he was held hostage in Italy for $17 million, an amount to which Getty infamously refused to pay. And the film then continues to follow the attempts of Paul's mother and Getty's daughter-in-law, Gail, played by Michelle Williams, in order to get her son back, along with the help of Getty's personal negotiator and former CIA agent Fletcher Chase, played by Mark Wahlberg. So, I really hate to say this about Ridley Scott, considering the fact that as a director, he has brought us 2 pinnacles of both science fiction and film in general, with both the original Alien movie and Blade Runner. But if this film is any indication, it is the fact that this guy is struggling to remain relevant these days, because the fact that his biggest hit this decade so far, since the year 2010, is The Martian, a film that, at least by today's standards compared to when it came out 2 years ago, I would say is just fine, and compounded by the fact that Fox had to blatantly lie to audiences about the type of film that Alien Covenant really was, it just really goes to show just how far from grace this guy has fallen. Which makes me really sad to say that this film is yet another example of Scott struggling to remain relevant in today's rapidly changing film environment, because while this film is perfectly serviceable, it is at the same time nothing special. It is very well shot, I like the bleak color palette that adds a whole new layer of character to this movie, and I give all the props in the world to Ridley, who at 80 years old was able to replan and reshoot all of the Getty scenes of the film in 9 weeks after the Kevin Spacey controversy. But I feel like in 10 years, that's all the people are going to be talking about with this movie, which is the recasting controversy, not the actual movie. And it also doesn't help that, which I just found out today, that FX's new miniseries that Danny Boyle is doing, Trust, the first season is going to be about J. Paul Getty, and literally the exact same thing that just happened in this movie, and that's only coming out in a couple months. My biggest problem with this movie has to be the fact that this entire movie really does feel like a missed opportunity, because, at least from my perspective, what this movie should have been about was this should have been about Getty and not about the kidnapping, because here's the problem. Christopher Plummer, despite the fact that he only came in completely last minute and shot all of his scenes in 9 weeks, he is absolutely fantastic in this movie, and easily the most interesting part about this movie for a role that wasn't even supposed to be his, despite the fact that he was Ridley Scott's original choice to play this role. Because every single time the film cuts to him, I've got 2 things that I'm thinking of. I'm like, because again, I am weird and I do this when I find out about a film, is like, okay, what would have happened if this had been Spacey in the role, despite the fact that Spacey would have been incredibly distracting because of how fake he looked in those first couple trailers with that horrible makeup. But also, good God, this guy is great. Please go back to him, because every time this film would cut away from him, I'm like, no, go back to Getty. He's interesting. Go back to him. The reason why I say that is because all the other characters and the other actors in this movie, none of them are giving bad performances per se, but it's just they're also written, they feel very one-dimensional and not as interesting as the main guy, because the thing that makes Getty so much more interesting than everybody else is the fact that this film gives so many layers to him, because the fact of the matter is they really do make him come off as this stone-cold son of a bitch who values the dollar more than human life, but they do it in a way that really makes you understand why he is this way. And I don't think I've ever seen a film do that before when it comes to these multimillionaire tycoon types, because these types of films usually always make them out to be like always the bad guy, really one-dimensional, never really have any character to him, and the fact that this movie does that, it really makes me wish that this had been a Getty biopic and not a kidnapping thriller about the kidnapping of his grandson. With Michelle Williams, who is supposed to be the centerpiece of this movie, in her performance as his daughter-in-law, she's fine in the movie, she's not egregiously bad, but I think this film goes about in the completely wrong way, showing her as the strong female character, which is the antithesis of Getty's old world thinking, in that she can't really think on her own, which really sucks because she really isn't given that much to do in the movie, and this accent, she's doing this really weird, like 1940s villain accent. And the problem is that despite the fact that this does take place in the 70s, it is a period setting, it just sounds really awful because nobody else is doing it. She's the only one in the entire movie that is doing this accent, and it feels really out of place and really weird. Weakest point of the movie, though, easily Mark Wahlberg. He is so friggin' out of place in this movie. It's almost kind of comical if I didn't already feel bad for what a shitty year he's had between this, Daddy's Home 2, and Transformers The Last Night. Now, I love Mark Wahlberg. He's given some absolutely terrific performances. Departed, that's one of the best performances I've ever seen, but it's almost like it took him like right out of the early 90s and plopped him into this movie because it sucks because he's trying his hardest with the dialogue, but he sounds like such an immature child in all of his delivery, and like when he's next to Plummer and pacing around all of his scenes, he just comes off as so miserably out of place. And it also doesn't help with the fact that every time I was hearing his dialogue and the way he was delivering, I'm hearing for some reason I'm picturing Matt Damon in the role and hearing Matt Damon's voice delivered, and it sounds 1,000 times more convincing. And it's probably one of the worst instances of miscastings I've ever seen, and it really makes him stick out like a sore thumb and almost completely turns this movie into an absolute dumpster fire. Now, while the miscasting of Mark Wahlberg, the uninteresting characters, and the humdrum pace are all certainly detriments to this film, it is very well made and intriguing enough because I have to say that with all of my problems with it, I was never once bored in it, and the fact that the recasting and the reshoots didn't completely sink this movie is definitely a commendable achievement. But with that being said, this film really can't seem to decide whether it wants to be a straight-up thriller or really have something to say about the status of the wealthy, and that makes it come off as not really being consistent tonally, which is why I can't recommend seeing this in the theaters, and also why I can't see this film getting any major awards recognition outside of Plummer for supporting actor, because I really cannot stress enough how great he is in the movie. The problem is they won't nominate him for how great of a performance he gives. They'll nominate him for coming in and shooting all of his scenes in 9 weeks over, and also with the Kevin Spacey controversy. That is why this film only gets 5 out of 10 stars from me. So that is it. That is my review for All the Money in the World. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Also, make sure to click that like button and that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter at Movie Nerd Review. Also, head on over to my website, movienerdreviews.com, for all of my other written reviews. And that is it. I will see you guys next time. Go!